I've spent over 3 months with one of the most immersive Yokes currently available. This flight sim Yoke sits proudly at the top of the tree in terms of pure features with a build quality to match. And in this video, we're going to see what it's like to fly with it on the sim, talk about the features and the build quality, and go through the good and the bad points. This is not a sponsored video, however Brunner did send this Yoke to me, but as always they have absolutely no influence in what I say and they won't see this video before it goes live. Let's start off with the features. It has 110 newtons of maximum pitch force with 6 newton meters of roll force. Both the pitch and the roll are more than enough for anything you're likely to need in a flight simulator. Honestly, it's really quite strong. I actually run it fairly low in terms of power across the board. The main benefit here though is not the force that it's pumping out. It's the wider range of force, or the resolution if you like. And that's pretty evident when you compare it to its baby brother, the CLS-NG Yoke. Now I'll leave a link to that video in the description. The roll travel is 180 degrees, pretty standard. Just the same as you would get in a real life Yoke. But this is the juicy bit. The pitch travel is 160 degrees, one of the longest throws of any flight sim Yoke, and fairly close to what you might expect to see in a real GA style aircraft like a Cessna or a TBM. And we'll go into why this is super important shortly. It's got a little flight display on the Yoke itself. I actually, I don't use that much. But you can flick it through a few pages here. You've got your instrument display, stopwatch, button configs, some telemetry data, and an information page. The only one I reckon would be of any real use is the timer or the stopwatch. But then again, I'm not using it for training. So if there is anyone out there using one of these Yokes for training, if you're a real life pilot using it, let me know in the comments if you actually use that display and what you use it for. As far as effects go, you're looking at turbulence, airspeed resistance, vibration effects, trim effects, which is absolutely game-changing, and stick shaker effects. Now let's jump over onto the sim and check it all out. We're on X-Plane, we're on the SR-22, to get some basic weather loaded on the Gold Coast. I'm sitting right in the middle of the runway right now, but that's fine. We just want to get this plane in the air, but there's a couple of things I want to show you. First would be what that pitch elevation looks like. That's your 160 mils, and then your 180 mils of travel. Now you can see that on the wing at the side. Now one of the coolest things is if I just bump on the brakes and put the RPM up on the engine, you'll see the Yoke based on the prop wash come out. Now you cannot say that's not cool. I do have a little bit of engine vibration on here. Many people don't like to run it. I do, so that's just the way I like to do it. Right, let's chuck this plane in the air. We go, and immediately you can sense a feeling of weightlessness in the it's just the wrong word, weightlessness. Everything just feels so fluent as soon as you come off the tarmac. It's just such a fantastic experience, and we're going pretty slow right now. We're only sitting at 100 knots. We're going to trim out a little bit, and that's another thing, that the trimming with a force feedback Yoke will change the way you fly in a flight simulator. And if there was, it's one of my favourite things about flying with a force feedback Yoke. We're just going to put a bit of altitude in, and then we're going to stall this plane out. Show you what that looks like. And I mean, all the time we're climbing here and we're flying, I'm getting little bits of feedback through the Yoke. It's got such an alive feeling. If you can get the profile dialed in right, and it does take some time, you know, you're in for an absolute treat. All right, let's try a power on stall in the SR22. "90 knots, 80 knots, 70. There we go. Oh, we're picking up speed now. That's another thing. The more airspeed you've got, the more power it takes to rotate the yoke. So the slower you go, the yoke gets kind of like really light and dead feeling. The faster you go, you know, it's really tight, quite hard to turn. All right, we will do that again. We'll go for a little bit of a steeper angle this time. There we go. And we're going to pick up a bit of airspeed here. We're just going to nose down. 120, 130, 140. Ease it off at 160. And you can really feel the extra effort at 160 knots it takes to bank the plane and to pitch it up or down. It needs a little bit of a trim adjustment. Gotta love the trim adjustment on a force feedback yoke. I think it might be time to change the weather conditions. Let's go in here. Where are we sitting at? We are at, let's go severe turbulence. Severe turbulence. Let's just see how this plays out. Well, the motion sim it's just all over the place. Alright, this might be a bit too crazy. Let's try and stall it in these conditions. Let's point her up. Power on. Down she comes. Jesus Christ, we're upside down. We are Alright, let's just grab hold of that. Alright, I think I've had enough of that. I think we just went too far there. Moving around so much I can't even get the pause button. Let's just chill that out a little bit. I went way too far. Pulled that back down to moderate weather, or moderate turbulence, sorry. And we'll fly back south. We'll just turn it around over the ocean. Still getting thrown around a lot. So yeah, one of the highlights in using a force feedback yoke is the weight of the yoke dependent on the speed, like I talked about there. It is like it just feels right, and the turbulence effects, I mean, how do you describe it? It's just, I've said this before, but it just makes the simulator come alive, especially in X-Plane. X-Plane kind of edges Microsoft Flight Simulator out just a little bit in terms of the way the yoke feels, and I think that's got to do with the flight model and the way, I don't know, I think the way you can feel, it's almost that sometimes it feels like you can feel the air rushing over the wing. It's so much fun. And you know, I have said this before, but if you thought flight simulation was addictive, try using a force feedback yoke, because it's a whole nother level. It really is. Alright, let's try a power off stall in this kind of turbulent weather. So we'll dip the power out, back to idle, and I'm just gonna, so you can feel immediately, you can feel there's no longer air coming from the prop, right? Or it's decreased at least. And you can feel that through the yoke. Absolutely incredible. Right, well, surely I'm getting the stall warnings. And the yoke, it's, you know, it's shaking. It's letting me know. We're just going to ease this weather up yet again. Moderate turbulence to light. Yeah, the turbulence affects the prop wash effect on the ground and in the air. I did review the Brunner force feedback rudders a while back, and the prop wash effect with that through the rudders is also quite incredible. But look, this back to yoke here, like, I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Paired up with some sort of motion platform, you know, it's just next level. It's absolutely next level. Like, if I don't think, based on my experience over the past, I don't know, I'd say 6 months. Yeah, it's been over 6 months. I don't think I could ever go back to a non-force feedback yoke. It's such a joy to fly with it. Expensive. I know it's very expensive, but for the right person, you know, just transforms everything in the sim. Now let's stick it on autopilot. Maybe you'll be able to see. Now the autopilot is controlling the yoke. Now if we go into heading mode, I will spin the heading around. You can see it moving. And the other way. It's very, very cool. Alright, autopilot off. Let's head our back round towards the airport. Take that flight. Oh, flight director off. Yeah, so let's put this up into the high range. Let's see. Let's go for around 190 knots, maybe 200. Trim the plane down a little bit for that speed. And again, the trim effects. Every time I use the trim wheel, I'm like, this is why a force feedback yoke exists. Right, 200 knots. Okay. And now to bank the plane at that speed, a substantial amount of effort is really required to pitch and push the nose down as well. One more stall and then that'll be us. So yank it back, that's hard. We are upside down. Oh, coming around. Yeah, we better grab a hold of that. Yeah, we're going to overstress the plane here. We're at 215 knots. Alright, I think that might be enough. So after that, it's time to look at the design and the build quality. Now, this thing is long, to the point that I recommend you actually measure out your space before dropping any coin on one of these. The base measures 21 centimeters wide and a whopping 43 centimeters long. This can be an issue when trying to mount it to the likes of a Next Level Racing Flight Sim Pro or other full cockpits. The fix for this is just to make your own custom deck like I have here. This also enables you to screw it down, which unfortunately is the only way to mount it. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking this looks just a little bit unfinished when you see it on the Brunner website, mainly because of the raw exposed metal finish. Honestly, I wasn't a massive fan of what it looked like until I got my hands on it. This thing, you know, it's a beast, and it looks and feels super high quality. I'll put some detailed shots of it up here so you can really get a close look. And you know, it's got such a strong industrial look and feel to it. And so it should. It's what you would expect when you're forking out this kind of cash. I can't fault the build quality in any way. Taking into consideration the cost of this, let's face it, it ain't cheap. And we will get to the price. But the build quality, you could say that it matches every dollar spent. As a testament to the build quality, and like the video states, I've spent 100 days with this, and I've used it a lot, and it still feels like it's brand new. Every time I turn it on, there's no rattles, no squeaks, nothing loose, still super quiet. It feels like it did the first day that I got it out of the box. This takes me onto the yoke handle itself. The yoke wheel is very much the same shape as its little brother, the CLS-NG, which I reviewed about 6 months ago. And again, there's a link in the description to that video. But this yoke wheel has an additional screen on the center, and it also is made from a different material. It feels like a softer, more premium plastic. Now, this could be maybe hard rubber, it's quite hard to tell, but I do like the way that this is finished off compared to the NG yoke. There is one thing though, and maybe two, let's call it two things. So the first one, the yoke wheel is about 15 to 20% smaller than the real life yoke, or the yoke that it's modeled on. Not really an issue as such, but I would have loved to see that yoke wheel just be made that little bit bigger. I do think at this price, more of a full-size yoke would have been the right thing to do. The next thing is, and look, this is a nitpick, but you cannot interchange the yoke wheel. If I'm spending that much money on such a high-end peripheral, I'd love to be able to buy extra wheels and interchange them on there, just like you see on the high-end sim racing wheelbases. Maybe this will come in time as the flight sim niche maybe this will come in time as the flight sim niche grows. I'd certainly love to see that. With these two things, like I said, I'm nitpicking a little bit here. But again, something sitting in this price range, I do feel like it's deserved. Overall though, the design and build quality is a massive thumbs up from me on both the base and the yoke wheel. Compatibility wise, it's a pretty seamless integration with X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Simulator. I've flown both for a fair amount. This takes me on to the software. I've never been a massive fan of the software. It's a bit of a love-hate relationship. Mainly the UI and lack of information out there for configuring it. There is a document online that does explain all the settings. It's not super obvious that it's available, or maybe I just overlooked it, I'm not sure. But I'll put a link in the description for that. The software is super configurable, almost to the point though that it's difficult to dial in, and it can get confusing. This can be good and bad. It's great if you like tinkering and adjusting, and not so good if you struggle with that sort of stuff. As much as it is plug and play, you do have to spend a bit of time dialing the profile in for each plane that you fly. But once the profile is saved for each specific plane, you can set it to auto load and tie the profile to that specific plane. So it's pretty good in that respect. It's time for everyone's favourite part to talk about, the price. There's no getting around it. It's a pricey bit of kit. Coming in at €2,178 at the time of this video. That's around 2,300 USD, there or thereabouts, plus shipping and potential taxes. Now, this is one of the most expensive yokes on the market, and many people will be priced out. It's substantially more expensive than its little brother, the NG yoke, but it does give you that extra power and that extra pitch travel, plus the built-in screen on the yoke. I think it's like the law of diminishing returns though. Sure, you can fly just the same with a $300 yoke, but what I think you're paying for here is the experience. And there's no other manufacturer yet, to my knowledge, that can deliver an experience like this. Maybe some people that have bought a Brunner in the past can jump in here, jump into the comments and share their thoughts, good and bad, as I haven't met anyone yet that's regretted splashing this amount of money on a flight yoke. The most common thing I see said is, oh my god, I could never go back to a normal yoke. Now, let's look at the sim racing industry or market, for instance. There are plenty of wheels up around this price and way more. But unlike the flight sim niche, sim racing has many mid-tier and low-end force feedback options. This is why I think it can make the price seem a little absurd to some. It's just because there's such a massive jump up. Overall though, it's about what you value and how you place that value. And that's going to be different for everyone. It's the only way buying something like this makes sense, if your values are aligned with what this thing is delivering. Look, this is not for the casual simmer. If you're an absolute flight sim junkie that loves the tech side of it too, then, the value adds are starting to, they're starting to stack up. If you're striving to add that extra layer of immersion to your simulator and you don't mind paying for that experience, then you're going to find value in a product like this. Now it's time for the best bit. It's the good and the not so good. So we'll start with the good, and I'll start off with the fact that it delivers a very convincing force feedback effect. It will completely transform your sim. It'll breathe so much life into it. The build quality is some of the highest I've ever seen. The software is extremely configurable. The Yoke works seamlessly with Microsoft Flight Simulator and X-Plane. The 160mm of pitch travel will make you never want to ever go back to anything less. It's quiet, like silent in operation. After all the hours I've spent flying it, it still operates as if it were new. And for me, it looks phenomenal on the sim. The flying experience when you get it dialed in makes flight simming so addictive. Everyone I speak to about this Yoke say the same thing. I'll never go back to a normal Yoke. And if you're one of those people, jump into the comments. And if you're not one of those, if you actually have regrets on buying a Brunner product, then same goes. Jump into the comments and let us know. Now for the not so good. Well, I'm sure you can guess what the number one point is here, and it's going to be the price. It's definitely going to put it out of reach for most. The software, although it was a pro, it's also a con, being that it can be a little bit confusing. And I think the yoke wheel should be just a little bit on the larger side. And finally, an on-off switch would be super handy. Getting your hands on one of these, if you're a flight sim nut, will blow you away. The feeling of the air rushing over the wing, the turbulence, the light, dead feeling of it at low air speeds, the way it gets tight and nimble as the airspeed increases, incredible. Engine vibrations, stick shaker effects, brilliant. But the one reason to buy a force feedback yoke is for the trimming effects. I cannot describe how much this has changed the sim. Being able to trim out using pressure feels so pure. I can't get enough of it. I know this seems like a very small thing, but it really isn't. I can't stress how important this is. Anyone with a Brunner yoke, if you're with me on this, please shout out in the comments, because as far as I'm concerned, that is the number one reason above all else that you may want to buy a force feedback yoke. So who is this yoke best suited for? Honestly, you need to really love flight simulation to get the most out of this, or potentially be a pilot in training. If the 160mm of pitch travel pricks your ears up, then this might be the right choice. If the 160mm of travel feels like a, yeah, kind of whatever, and it doesn't bother you too much, then the cheaper NG yoke would be the go, as I don't think I'd pay the extra €800 just for the, just for the extra in strength or the force. For me, the draw card is that pitch travel. Now, this yoke is not a toy. It's a piece of equipment, and it's for the most hardcore simmers that are willing to dig deep to have the best and create an experience that's, you could say, as close to real life as possible. The best way to know if something like this is for you or not is to try and get your hands on one at some sort of event. They usually have a semi-decent profile loaded to give you a really good baseline. I've said it before, if you ever see a Brunner stand at a flight sim event, then get in line. I guarantee you will know within the first 60 seconds whether flying with one of these is worth it for you.